Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, where longtime strength and conditioning coach Tommy Moffitt explores everything from the art of coaching, improving performance, sports nutrition, and mental training. Now, welcome your host, Coach Tommy Moffitt.
Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast. If you're listening for the first time, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends. Before we get to today's guest, I'd like to take a moment to talk about the Moffitt Method Training Program and what we are all about. The Moffitt Method Program is a culmination of my 34-year coaching career in high school and college. We offer a remote coaching solution for your sport organization, teams, or the entire athletic department. Our product includes a 52-week year-round lifting and running program with over 180 instructional videos. If you are interested or know of someone who may be interested, please contact us via our website, themoffittmethod.fit, or you can email us at info@themoffittmethod.fit. Again, that email address is info@themoffittmethod.fit for more information. Our wonderful guest today is Coach Rodney Hill from the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, Arkansas. A graduate of Howard and Mercer University, Coach Rodney Hill has worked with the New York Giants, Detroit Lions, and the Buffalo Bills of the NFL. He was a head strength coach at Howard University and an assistant at LSU, Duke, and the University of Central Florida. Coach Hill currently serves as the assistant strength and conditioning coach in charge of sports science for the University of Arkansas football program. Coach Hill holds certifications from the CSCCA, NSCA, USA Boxing, Vertimax, Precision Nutrition, and he is a corrective exercise specialist. Coach is married to his beautiful wife, Kim, a former college softball coach, and currently a coach at the University of West Alabama. Welcome to the podcast, Coach. How are we doing tonight?
Excellent, Coach. Thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity, and it's great to always connect with you again.
Good deal, man. Well, I'm excited about it. Looking forward to it, and hopefully we drop some knowledge bombs here for the listeners. And I feel good about it. I think it's going to be a great podcast. All right, so let's start with how you got into strength and conditioning. Who were some of your early influences, and what has been some of the best lessons that you have learned so far?
Sure. Well, going back to junior high and high school when I was introduced to, lifting weights, strength and conditioning, and probably a lot more strength and conditioning, I was always one of the stronger kids in school, and my high school de facto strength and conditioning coach, he was also our running backs coach, Coach Bill Haas. He taught me a lot. I was always asking questions, and he always had good answers and was always there to help me, learn, get stronger, get better, move better. And, I thank him for that. So that way, once I got to college, I was already ahead of the curve as a freshman coming in, just one, being strong, and two, understanding what the emphasis of the day was or what we were trying to do, what exercises work, what muscles. So if I needed to get extra work, I could ask the strength coach, but I could also do some stuff on my own. And then once I got to college, obviously played football at Howard University. I wanted to go to physical therapy school. And that summer, I was graduating in 2013. I think I needed to take an extra 1 or 2 classes. So I decided to do a summer internship with the head strength coach then, Coach Nick Latham. Shout out Coach Latham. Yeah. He taught me a lot. I got to follow him around for days on end for the entire summer. I was like, I love this. This is exactly what I want to do, especially if physical therapy school does not work out. And it ended up not working out. And I actually became an on-field assistant defensive line coach at a Division II school where I'm from. Yes, sir. That's actually my first coaching job. And they didn't have a strength coach. They probably could have used the Moffitt method, right?
Yeah.
um,
Shout out Moffitt method.
but I was able to help out in the weight room there, and from there I went up to Penn State, got my first internship, and the rest has kind of been history.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing that I've learned in doing this, two things is, one, it's not what you do, it's how you do it, because there's a lot of people out there that are doing the same things, but
Yeah.
what's going
Hmm.
to set you apart? What is it in your attention to detail and your focus and the way that you're coaching and the way that you're able to get guys to buy in, even within your sets and reps? What is it that's going to set you apart? And then also, everybody learns different. You can't communicate to everybody the same way because people don't comprehend things the exact same way. So if somebody's not getting something, you don't want to blame it on them. You got to find a way to communicate in a way in which they'll understand it. That's what
Yeah.
we're paid to do. That's why we have these jobs, because if everybody knew everything and everybody could just understand everything, then our jobs could
Yeah.
be replaced by artificial intelligence, but that's not the case.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to, communicate effectively through multiple groups of people in order to make sure that everybody understands what the mission is.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned your high school strength coach. Did he play college football, or and where did he, get his knowledge from? Where was his experience from?
I think a lot of it was from, I think he did play college football at Muhlenberg College, which is in the
Oh,
Lehigh
wow.
Valley in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And he was a running back there, and he was an exercise physiology major there. He ended up becoming a physical education teacher as well. So he was high school football coach, physical education teacher, strength and conditioning coach. So he picked
Yeah.
up a lot of knowledge at college,
Right.
through his studies.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. That's awesome. Um, so having 3 stops in the NFL, okay, and then you've coached at a lot of colleges and been a head strength coach yourself. What are some of the most notable differences that you have seen between college and professional football players?
Sure. I think the first thing is the training age, right? For the most part, especially somebody coming out of, like, let's say LSU, right? That they're going to be seasoned and they're going to be good lifters. You knew when you got a guy from LSU at a certain spot, he was going to be a good lifter. We didn't have to, take the time to really, really develop these guys because they were already coming in developed. So I would say that's the biggest thing, is you're trying to take a guy from his 93% to his 100%, as
Yeah.
opposed to in college you're trying to take a kid, not a man, you're trying to take
Yeah.
a kid from his 55% to his 90, 95, 100%. So the job is much bigger in college than it is in NFL, but also in college you get a lot more time to train these guys throughout the year. In the NFL, during the off season, there are only 2 weeks where it is just strength and conditioning. And if I read correctly, or if I listened correctly the other day, the Chiefs, because they play so long into the postseason every year now, those first 2 weeks, they're virtual now. So now if you're the strength coach
Oh,
there,
wow.
yeah. So if you're the strength coach there, you don't even have those 2 weeks to have those guys in the weight room. And the second you get them back, they can lift and they can run and they can train, but they're also back out onto the field. So you lose that time
Yeah.
where you get to train them. And the biggest training block that you have is in season.
Yeah.
Also, just the motivation factor. There's a little less of that in the NFL or in professional sports than there is in college, because now that you have NIL and stuff, you got guys getting paid, but the money is the motivator, and these guys
Yeah.
they're older, so they're a little more mature, and having people who are 30, 32 years old in the NFL that you can follow, you kind of understand how you have to handle your business and
Right.
how to be a pro. Whereas, even when you come in as a freshman, you're still essentially following other people who are kind of kids trying to figure out how to be a man, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One of your mentors, Coach Craig Fitzgerald, was on here, and he talked a lot about that. And, talking to him, you could tell that, the organization is dialed in and the players are training hard. And I'm sure there are professional football and other professional sport teams that have that culture where everybody's working hard. And then there's probably some teams, that don't have the same type of leadership, or strength and conditioning isn't something that is held in high regard. It's just not one of those things that the organization stresses. And so, yeah, every professional squad is probably a little different, just like every university team is a little different. Now, on that, you mentioned the NIL. We haven't talked a lot about the NIL on here, but one thing I want to ask you a question about the transfer portal.
Sure.
How do some of those players compare to the rest of the squad when they come in? Are some of those guys better than, is there a difference in those portal guys? Or some of them able to keep up with you, and then some more like a high school player? How's that been for you?
Absolutely. I think that's a case-by-case thing, right? And most of it depends on where the guy is coming from. If he's coming from a place where, they maybe don't have as many resources. Like we have a receiver here that, he came from a place that was a little under-resourced and probably didn't have the budget and the resources that we have here. But, he's figuring it out. He's training really, really hard. And he can ball. Like he is a flat out baller. Like we're glad to have him. We're glad he's here. And now that he is here and he has the resources, it's awesome to see his body develop and watch him put on the weight. So a lot of those guys, the coaches do the work on the front end for that. Like, can a guy get here? Can he adjust, and will he fit in and be a part of the culture? So I think, part of that also comes with how much did they play wherever they were at. But if they're coming to a place like here, like Arkansas, you probably had to play a bunch wherever you were at, So I'd say for the most part, from what I've seen, there hasn't been a whole lot of lag when guys get here.
Cool.
There's a little bit here and there, but it's, like I said, it's a case-by-case basis. And usually, especially with athletes of this caliber, they catch on and their bodies adapt really, really quickly.
Yeah. And that's something that, has changed just in the year and couple of months that I've been first. But there are rosters that turn over 14, 15 guys in addition to the guys that are going pro, So some rosters have turned over a lot of players, and then there's others like y'all, I'm sure, that didn't have a lot of turnover. So that's cool. So Coach Sowders, and I know him. He's a great dude. Has a great reputation in our field. How does he run the program there, and what is something that you've taken from him so far that you really like?
Absolutely. I think he's done a phenomenal job of building the culture here. I think he's done a phenomenal job of doing that with a positive attitude as well. Coach Sowders he's very big in his faith, and he's not a profanity laden guy. Like, he's a big what the heck kind of guy. So and he does a good job of holding guys accountable. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you're a starting quarterback or if you are a walk-on. If you're late, you're going to do the up downs or the burpees. If you're going to get on the stair stepper. Everybody is held to the same standard. We get a lot of guys who are ticked off about it at the time, but they understand that, and he does a great job of letting them know, like, this is for you. Like, this is to help you not only on the field, but in life.
Yeah.
With actions come consequences. Not always bad consequences, but good consequences. He does a good job of communicating with the players, the objective for the day, what we're trying to do conceptually. So that way, there's not a whole lot of questions. So guys can understand what we're trying to do. Obviously, we talked about it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And I think he does a great job with his programming as well. And then the relationships. I think that's the biggest part. He is able to connect with everybody in the building, not just the players on the team, but the coaches in the building, the administration in the building, the administration not in the building. He's a great relationship builder, and that being a great relationship builder also helps him with the recruiting aspect as well, because as you know, as a head strength coach, you play a part in recruiting as well. So he does a great job with that as well.
Yeah. Now, his wife, isn't she a softball player, former softball player and coach?
Yes, sir. She used to play at Southern Miss. They just had a child, so congratulations to the Sowders
Yeah. Oh,
and on the
wow.
birth
Cool.
of Gibson Sowders. And
Yeah.
and he was a football player at Western Kentucky as well. So
Yeah.
Gibson should be pretty athletic, right?
Yeah. Well, so your wife, Kim, and his wife are because I think at one time she may have been was she a college coach herself?
Yes, sir. Yes, she was.
Yeah. So with Kim coaching in college and her coaching in college, y'all might put together a nice squad.
Absolutely. They actually, Shelby, Coach Sowders' wife, and Kim actually
Yeah.
met for the first time a week or two ago at our spring game on April 15th. And afterwards, it was just them just talking softball.
Yeah.
Oh, I know this person.
Yeah.
Oh, I know that person. Oh, yeah. What about this? Oh, yeah. What about that? Remember this? Remember that? Yeah, I was there for this. Yeah, I was there for that. And, it's funny how small the world
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it is in strength and conditioning. So I'm
Absolutely.
sure it's like that in softball. So she was a pitcher. What position did Kim play? Oh, Kim was a pitcher.
Yes, sir.
So they were both pitchers. Wow.
Yes, sir.
They could put together a pretty good squad.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into some of the nitty gritty. Okay. And tell us about your responsibilities at Arkansas. And I know your title says sports science, but what exactly does that mean? And what does a typical day look like?
Sure. Well, right now that means that I am overseeing the GPS, which we use Catapult, and then the force plate, which we use the Vault Force Decks right now. And a typical day for us today, we jumped all of our athletes for the first time this semester, but just trying to make sure that you get everybody, making sure that the force plate is on, making sure that it's working, making sure that everything is loaded the way it's supposed to. We use an iPad here as opposed to the laptop. So
yeah, it's wireless. It's wireless now.
Yes, sir. Vault has come a long
Yeah, we never
way.
had that.
Vault has sure come a long way. So just making sure that, and the force plate operation is honestly pretty easy. I just type in the guy's name. You make him stand on the force plate. It's like a fancy scale. I got that from you, actually. Force plate's like a fancy scale. Takes his weight. You make him jump 3 times. He gets off, and then you get the next guy. It takes 60 seconds per guy. Now, the catapult, on the other hand, is a bit more tedious and takes a bit longer on the daily, because when you come in, you have to figure out what time practice starts. Then you have to set the alarm so that way all the units will automatically turn on for whatever time you set it for. I try to set it for 10 minutes before practice starts, and then I'll go back and I'll edit out whatever those 10 minutes later, right? Yeah. Then once you set those alarms, you have to take the units to the locker room, and our locker room is downstairs, which isn't that big of a deal. You just take the units, take the docks, load them up, put them on the cart, push it downstairs, and depending on if it's a practice day or a conditioning day, that depends on if you're going to wear the the sports bras, we call them bros
Yeah.
at Duke.
Yeah.
If you're going to wear those, in which case you have to take the unit, put the unit in the sports bra, and then put that out so that way they can put it on before they go to their meetings or what have you. Or if it's a practice, you take it down and then you put it in their shoulder pads, right?
Yeah.
So once you put it in their shoulder pads, everything's good. You go out to practice. If you're live tracking, that's how you know if all the units turned on. But we haven't started the live track yet. We'll do that in season. We'll just go out and we'll check a couple guys' units and make sure that they're on. And if one is on or 5 are on, then, we just assume that the rest of them are on. We don't check every guy's. We just don't have the time or the manpower for that, right? So you let them go through practice. Then once practice is over, they have to all funnel into the locker room. And on their way into the locker room, you take everybody's unit out of their shoulder pads. Sometimes it's a pain. Some people wear gloves because it's all sweaty and nasty. The jerseys get, a little disgusting, but it is what it is. You take them, you put them all back. Then once you put them all back, you figure out who may have slipped and walked past you that you didn't get. So then you go into the locker room, you retrieve the rest of the units. Then you take the units back upstairs, you plug them back into their charge ports, and then you have to download the data. Once you download the data and you make sure that all the units are there, and you've downloaded the data, then you have to edit out whatever times that you didn't use. So like if you're not live tracking, you have to take a mental note or write down whatever time practice started and then whatever time practice ended, because when you get the unit back, practice is already over. And by the time you turn them off, practice may have been over for 30 minutes. So that's going to make the player load a little higher, might make the player load per minute a little lower because you're not really doing anything because the units are just sitting there. So you have to go back, you have to edit out the time on the beginning and on the end of practice that they weren't doing anything. Then you have to sync the data again after that. Right. Then once all of that's done, we use Excel to build our catapult reports. So there's a lot of people out there who just set it up in Open Field. Open Field is like the cloud for catapult, like their cloud-based system where you can go in and, it's like their hub. You can set up whatever you need to set up, right? And we'll go in and we'll download the information, export it to Excel, because, if somebody got 2 yards of high speed running, but they weren't running in that zone for, the 0.5 seconds or whatever the dwell time is, Catapult doesn't give them the unit, but we've decided to give them the effort, but we've decided that we want to give them the effort for that. So I have to kind of go back in, scrub the data.
Clean it up.
Exactly. Make sure all of that looks good. And then, we have a table that we've built for all of that we put our metrics in. You go back, look, and, we try to highlight the guys who hit a certain velocity or hit a certain percentage of their velocity or even PR that day. And then within that table, within those tables, you can leave notes about what the day looked like, if there's anybody you're worried about from a player load standpoint, from a high-speed yardage standpoint, or anything like that. Just something to give these coaches a quick glimpse, a cliff notes, if you will, about what happened that day or what we need to do, what we should do, not what we need to do, but what we should do or what recommendations that you may have going forward.
Yeah. All right. Let me ask you this. So I know what the bro looks like, because when we used Catapult, they had already had those, but we actually had to make little pouches for the bugs to fit in our shoulder pads. How do they do that now? Do the shoulder pads have a pocket, or do y'all still have something that Velcros to the back of the shoulder pad?
Right. So they do that with the shoulder pads now. Not all of our shoulder pads have those. We got it's awesome actually. Yeah. We got pouches from Catapult that have like a little Velcro strap, so you can wrap it around the back of the shoulder pads, Velcro it. It stays. It's pretty good. It stays. It doesn't move. You just open it up, put the it's called a vector tag, I guess is the technical name. Put the vector tag in, seal it up, and you don't have to worry about it falling out during practice. the staff before us actually did something pretty cool. They 3D printed catapult cases that were pretty thick. They tied them on with like zip ties on the back, and then you just open it up, stick the catapult in, and it was made for the exact size of the unit.
Oh, wow. 3D printed them, huh?
3D. Every time anybody says anything about it, like, oh, did you see the 3D printed pouches that they have on the back, or the 3D printed cases? I'm like, yeah, those are cool.
Oh, that's funny. So y'all use Excel for your reporting also, like your pivot tables and charts and graphs and stuff. So y'all don't have a piece of software to for your reporting, for the presentation, reporting, etc. Besides Excel.
No, sir. Like an athlete management system, no, we don't have it. We don't have one of those.
Database or whatever.
Right. Yeah, no, we don't have one of those. We're just cranking it all out on Excel right now, just like the LSU days.
Yeah, All right, now let me ask you this, and you're one of the 5 strength coaches, or you're sports science?
I'm one of the 5, and I've get just
cool
strength coach - sports science.
Yeah, sports science, just like at LSU. What group are you working with in the weight room? How do y'all do that? Is the team broke up by groups? You train someone different every day, or how is that done?
So we haven't gotten to groups yet. Everything's been pretty general, and you have your guys at your rack, and one group you may have some receivers and some DBs. The next group you may have some D linemen, and the next group you may have the quarterbacks.
Cool. And a lot of people do it that way.
Yeah, and it's been good because you get to know everybody that way. You know what I mean? Like, you don't just know what's going on with a specific group of people. You get to figure out what's going on with everybody. And I remember when I was working with the Lions, Coach Nash was like, the reason they did the same thing. They were like, the reason we do that is because if a coach asks you how somebody's doing, I don't know is not the answer.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Hey, I talked to him the other day. Great man. We're talking about Coach Harold Nash. Shout out Coach Harold Nash. Great human being, man. Great human being. Every year, and since I've been in coaching, every year he is one strength coach that has called me about every LSU player that they had on the board. He's always been one to check up on them. And, in the past, I had teams that would send questionnaires for me to fill out. And that was like another piece of work for me. And some of them were pretty in depth, but Coach Nash always called and we would sit and talk, about each player. So he called me not long ago. So that's cool. So the draft, now this episode won't be shown, for 3 or 4 weeks, but the draft is tomorrow. No, it starts tomorrow, correct? Today's Thursday.
It starts tonight.
It starts tonight. So there's some cats that are nervous tonight, man. So here's a neat bit of sports science. So I called my buddy at S2 Cognition today. I saw him. He had a Instagram post today, and it said we did not replace the Wonderlic test. And then he says, we are not a personality test. And he went down and tried to explain to everyone what S2 is. And so I called him, and he said they've been so busy with teams calling. And it was neat to get his perspective on the draft. He gave me a couple of sleepers, his picks for the draft. I'm not going to disclose who they are. I don't know if Las Vegas has a line for who's going to be picked when and all of that, but he gave me a couple of sleepers for the draft, which I thought were pretty cool. So that was fun. Do y'all use anything like that you know of, like S2 or anything with the eyes, or like Jack, Jack was always fired up about the eyes at LSU. Do y'all do anything else other than force plate and GPS?
No, not yet. At least I think we're looking to
Yeah.
get to that, but we're trying to take it one
One
thing
step
at
at
a
a
time.
time. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I
Yeah.
do like that. I'd like that S2 cognition test. I think I saw everybody, the way everybody is talking about it. It sounds
Yeah.
like if you score well on it, it's not guaranteed that you'll be good, but if you score bad on it, it is borderline guaranteed that you will not be
Yeah.
good in the
Well,
NFL.
so he had another. So I follow him. Brandon Alley is one of the founders of the company. I was actually his strength coach at the University of Tennessee. So
Wow.
I follow his social media stuff, and there are different parts of there's different parts to the test. So you could score low in one area and score very well in another. And a low score doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to be a bad player. And I think some people have that misconception, and it's been talked about enough that he actually put something on Instagram about it and had a couple of sound bites. But it's, there's different parts of the test. And it's, it depends on what position you play, what part of the test you don't do well in. And the good thing about it is you can get better at it. It's not a death sentence if you score poorly in a particular area, because there are some things that you can improve upon in those areas. But it's pretty neat, man. I'm excited about the draft. We'll have to go. I'm sure Brady and Aaron are down there watching it now, or when it comes on. Probably coming on here pretty soon. So let's get back to to our questions here. I got sidetracked there. That's pretty common with me and the podcast. So I think our regular listeners are used to that. So I know GPS tracking in the catapult is new. Okay. What are some of the things that you've seen that are intriguing to you? And how will the staff utilize the information that you're getting to drive outcomes with the football team?
Absolutely. The biggest thing right now for us is the data collection. You want to get a sample size before you start to make any changes to anything. But the big thing for me with Catapult right now is just trying to figure out what means what. Like how can I put this? Like, all right, so you've got your player load, right? All right, player load is high, player load is low. What makes the player load high? What makes the player load low? Right. So the one thing that I've noticed, and this might be wrong, so if there's somebody out there that has a different answer, please let me know. But the biggest thing behind the player load is the yards or the distance traveled, right? But also along with that, I'll be looking at somebody's player load and I'll be like, look, you had the highest player load, but then I'll see, okay, you didn't have the highest amount of yards. You had the fourth or fifth highest amount of yards. Okay, so now let's dig a little deeper and see what else is it. Is it the high speed yardage? Is it the IMAs? Is it your acceleration load? Is it the accelerations and decelerations? What is it about this that made your player load so much higher than everybody else's, even though it wasn't necessarily the yards?
Right.
So trying to figure some of that stuff out, and then just really, really trying to dig through. There's so many metrics. Like if you were to export a Catapult Excel file just from one day, the amount of metrics that you get, it's got to be close to 500 metrics. So you got to really sift through that and figure out what's important for you too, what's important to you. So really trying to figure out what's important for us, right? Which right now for me is the player load and what's making the player load go up and down. And then two, trying to get the coaches to figure out what is important. Like right now, we're nowhere near trying to get these guys to understand IMAs and explosive yardage and stuff like that. What was their player load? How many yards did they cover? What percentage did they run? How many times did they run that? how much high speed yardage did they get? You know what I mean? How many accelerations? How many decelerations? Keep it simple right now. Obviously,
Right.
we both know that there's so much more involved in catapult, but we're not there yet. We're just trying to get everybody to understand the basics.
Yeah.
And I would say for programming, one, it'll help a lot with your summer programming, because you can take, like, from spring ball, I took averages for a bunch of the stuff that I just mentioned, and I broke down the averages for each position group, and you can then use that to build up your summer running program. So that way you can be like, okay, based off of not that they're going to practice exactly how they practiced in the spring and the fall, but you have something to base it off of, to be like,
Yeah.
okay, well, we are really trying to prepare these guys for the demands of practice, and then practice will prepare these guys for the demands of the game, right? And then from a return to play standpoint, if you've got anybody that's banged up, whether it's, returning from a knee or from a hamstring, or somebody who's been out for a while, you can look at the average amount of yards, the average, like we said, all those averages, and use that to build somebody up with build somebody's tolerance up, or build somebody's player load, and their high speed exposures and things like that up, to make sure that they're ready to get back, or they're ready to go when they're back to their max acceleration, their max deceleration, and tracking the percentages of those things, to make sure that way they can handle, they can tolerate high speed accelerations, or
Right.
high velocity decelerations, or lots of high velocity running, or just that overall volume of running on their legs at different velocities.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can actually give the coach some percentages based on where he is, and they're accurate. You can say,
Yes.
Coach, he's at 65% this week. Our goal next week is to get him to 85%. And when you have those numbers from practice, you can get him, what 85% of a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday practice is in all of those different metrics. And so, and then coupled with the force plate, you can really pinpoint that return to play, and where that player is, and the timeline that he's going to be ready to go back to practice. And you told me, and I thought this was good. You told me, I guess it was yesterday, that everyone on the staff has some responsibilities with return to play. And for the listeners, that is a neat term for, and I guess at LSU, we probably started calling it return to play 2 or 3 years ago. But that is when you have an injured player, instead of him sitting in the training room, or going back to the dorm room, or hanging out in the weight room doing bench press all day, you actually have a progressive program based on his injury status and where he is in that process, and you actually train him and to get him ready to return to play. And so y'all all do that there, which is really cool. Now, what are some of the things that y'all have done in return to play that might be a little different here, or is it very similar to the way we did it here at LSU?
I think it's pretty similar to what we did at LSU. So the number one thing with return to play is making sure that guys don't fall so far out of shape. That way, when they get back, it's miserable trying to reacclimate to practice. So that's the number one thing we're trying to do, is make sure that these guys stay in shape, make sure that they stay strong, and work around whatever limitations that they have due to their injuries. So, if it's an upper body injury, what can we do with their lower body to make sure that we could still help these guys out, but also what can we do from a rehabilitation or a strengthening standpoint to make sure that these guys are getting the necessary work. Obviously, they're getting that with the medical staff, but we want to make sure that we're working with them to be able to help get these guys back as fast and as safely as possible. So yeah, I'd say that it mirrors what we did at LSU pretty much, pretty well, pretty similarly.
Yeah. But the way we did it, we assigned someone different every day to do it. So people could take turns
Right on.
being at practice, but y'all all do it. So that's cool. So you oversaw our force plate analytics here at LSU and at Duke. How are they used daily within college athletics? Okay, as a whole, I'm getting your expert opinion here. And what are some of the main takeaways when using a force plate? Because I know you're really good at this. So I just kind of want you to share with us some of the things that you get out of using a force plate.
Absolutely. So when I look at the force plate, right, I think you break it down into four main categories. You've got fatigue, you've got asymmetries, you've got return to play, you got fatigue, return to play, asymmetries, and then long-term athletic development, right? Not every all of the metrics that you get, they're all interchangeable, right? Like just because I'm looking at RSI for fatigue doesn't mean that RSI can't be used for long-term athletic development. And the biggest thing with the force plate is that force plate it's a response to the load, whether the load is practice or the load is training for the week. It's the response to the load, right? The GPS, for instance, catapult would give us the load, then then the force plate would tell us how did they respond to that load.
Yeah.
Are we burying them? Are we peaking? Are we doing what we're trying to do with these guys, right? And then also context is key. Context is key with this. So
Yeah.
over the summer, especially in college football, over the summer, we're grinding dudes. We know it's miserable. There's times where we know that it's hard and we're burying them. And the RSI, which is your bet, in my opinion, well, and according to research, I guess, is the best indicator for neuromuscular fatigue, right? That RSI, reactive strength index, RSI modified, technically, if you're doing a counter movement jump, if the RSI modified for a counter movement jump is decreasing, and it's from a 0.67 to a 0.66 to a 0.65 the next week, and then maybe even a 0.64 after that the next week. We understand what we're doing. We're out there, we're running these guys hard. They're hitting PRs and max velocity. We understand that hitting these PRs and max velocity are very, very, very taxing, both from a central fatigue standpoint and from a peripheral fatigue standpoint. So it just is what it is. Does that mean what we're doing isn't working? No, because these guys are still out there hitting PRs. They're still getting stronger. They're still moving heavyweight. Yeah, they're going to be tired. Yes, they're going to be taxed, but also their bodies are going to adapt. And that's what we're trying to do. We can pull back whenever we need to pull back, which every training program has a point in time where you pull back a little bit in the summer or in those hard times, and you'll see those metrics that you're looking for go back up. And then in the fall, that's when you're really looking to peak these guys. So when you can really, really make the adjustments to your programming, if need be, based off of how those guys are feeling objectively through the data that you get through the force plate. And then just looking at things like your eccentric mean force, right? If your eccentric mean force is going up, that has been said to go along with a higher 1RM squat, 1 repetition maximum squat. So the guys with the higher eccentric mean force are usually your better squatters, right? Looking at if you're doing plyometrics, if you've got a heavy plyometric emphasis, then your rate of force development, specifically your concentric rate of force development, should probably be increasing. That's a long-term athletic development or performance. How do we know, right? How can we track to see if that's getting better? Your overall, if you're getting stronger, then you should be able to put more impulse, which is force over time, into the ground, right? So your impulse should go up as well. So if your impulse is going up, your rate of force development is going up, you're probably doing something right, What else? Your RSI, the way I look at RSI also is an explosiveness metric. So if you're if you're RSI, right? RSI modified, excuse me, for any purists out there, right? RSI modified is jump height divided by time to take off. That's the technical metric that's the technical formula for your RSI modified. So within that, you've got your eccentric and your concentric duration in your time to take off. So if your time to take off and your eccentric and concentric duration are both shorter, but your jump height is getting higher, then your RSI is probably going to go up. That also means that you're probably becoming more explosive or probably becoming more twitchy. And you can also correlate that with your rate of force development because you're developing more force and you're developing it quicker. Does that help? Does that answer the question?
Knowledge bombs. Hey, you just started spitting knowledge just then. So you said, so one of the things that I thought was really neat was where you talked about that your squat going up based on give it to me again, eccentric
mean force,
which you held that back from me, man. Where's that been all along? Like that's the first time I've heard you say that.
I'm just reading and learning, and so
You've been holding out on me.
So
eccentric, when eccentric mean force goes up, that means, or you feel like that there's a positive correlation in your back squat going up as well.
Yes, that is. I read that in a research paper.
Yeah.
A couple of weeks ago. That's what I would consider in my head like a strength metric. Eccentric and concentric mean force are strength metrics.
Yeah.
And then from an asymmetry standpoint, if I may, real quick, another thing that I've been thinking about, right? So we can look at rate of force development, which is a big telling. I used to not be big on rate of force development because I read a paper that talked about if you and I weighed the exact same, right? All things being equal, rate of force development doesn't have anything to do with jump height. If we both develop the same amount of impulse, but your rate of force development is higher than mine, we're still going to jump the same height. So for a minute, I was like, you know what? I don't even care about rate of force development anymore. Just research paper of the week just kind of got me going that way, right? But obviously, all things being equal, I would rather have the guy who can develop force faster than the guy who takes too long to develop force, right? Yeah. If all things are equal, because I have a better shot at whatever sport that I'm playing, especially in football, especially in American football. And then, like I said, from an asymmetry standpoint, that's something you want to look at, because if one leg is developing force much faster than the other, then we know we probably need to intervene there. That, and then something like time to peak force. If your time to peak force is off, then like your impulse could be the same, right? Like we're both generating the same amount of impulse, but the time to peak force and the rate of force development are off, then you know that they're probably not where they need to be yet, and you still need to have some sort of intervention and continue to monitor that before they get back. And also with these asymmetries, right? A lot of people would think that I couldn't wait to say this one. A lot of people think that, all right, let's give them some more single leg RDLs, or let's give them some more dumbbell split squats, right? But because of the force plate combine that we used to do, we learned that, a lot of those asymmetries will disappear when you put that weight on somebody and slow them down. So are we really, if we give them dumbbells and have them doing split squats and lunges and things like that, are we really positive that is going to improve that asymmetry, especially when you're doing something that is ballistic in nature and moving really, really fast?
Right. Yeah. When we did the force plate combine, and, we did counter movement jump, squat jump, mid-thigh isometric pull. We did the Sparta science force plate jumps, and we did the 5-rep squat assessment. How many lines of data did we get off of that? You could still be crunching those numbers.
I literally could still be crunching those numbers, Coach.
Yeah. There was so much information. Yeah. So let me ask you this. So a lot of times, and you alluded to this, that, a lot of times I think people think that all of these analytical devices is to coddle, excuse me, coddle your players and say, oh, he might be doing too much. He's doing too much of this or too much of that. But that's really not the case.
Absolutely.
It's a way of monitoring them. And then you even said it's a way of looking at the response to a load. And so, this is rhetorical. I'm sure that you also get information that says we have to do more with this young man.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so it's not all about putting a bridle on your coaching staff or on a player. A lot of times you see things that you say, we need more running. We need more high speed distance. So, or we need more squats, or we need more plyos. I think I'm close on that. How would you, how would you answer that question if somebody asked you?
Absolutely. So your first episode or your first podcast that you had with Coach Brian Johnson,
Yeah.
he said something that has really resonated with me, right? Whether you're undertraining or you're overtraining, you're going to get the same result. And a lot of that will pop up on the force plate because if we're detrained or we're deconditioned, you're going to see a lot of those metrics drop just like you would if you're fatigued. So
Right.
if you're looking at averages of guys and, you may have a guy who's got a catapult who's not playing as much as he would like to and not getting as many reps in practice as he would like to. So now his metrics are down, which is bringing down the averages of the position group. Now it's like, okay, we got to do something with him, whether it's we take him and we run him more, he's getting more reps in Indy. We got to make sure that, in case he does have to play, he's ready. He's not going out there detrained and deconditioned and getting hurt. And now, we're really in a bad spot. So we, like you said, we want to use it to make sure that, some people aren't doing too much, and doing too much is relative because different people can handle different loads, right? Like everybody is not the same. There's not one cookie cutter approach. And especially at this level of football, these guys' bodies will adapt to a lot of stuff, So we want to make sure that you're not doing too much, which is relative, but we also want to make sure that you're doing enough, that you're not just getting by or you're not getting underworked because again, shout out Coach Brian Johnson, with your undertraining or overtraining, you're going to get the same result.
Coach B, that was, it was our first release of a podcast and still maybe one of the funnest podcasts that I did because I coached the guy and I looked, what it did is, it forced me to go on YouTube and I started watching all of Brian's games when he was a Tiger. I started reminiscing. I got a little sentimental. And I was so fired up to do that podcast because I had watched all of these games and, certain players get fired up for certain teams. And for whatever reason, whether it was a coach dissed him at that program or something happened on his recruiting trip, or they didn't even recruit him. But Brian was highly recruited, and he was from Tallahassee, Florida, and Godby High School. So he always had a rock in his shoe when we played Florida, man. And it was something to watch him play. And I was so fired up for that episode. Still, to this day, the podcast that I had the most fun on. So this leads me to the next question. Okay. When you do make adjustments, okay, do y'all make adjustments on an individual basis, or are those adjustments made with the entire team or position group? So when you get the information if you got to step it up or you got to pull back? How is that done? What's that process look like?
Well, that's a case by case thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, at the smallest level, at the most cellular level, it is individual, right? It's individualized, but there might be a trend across an entire position group that then makes it, it makes it where you need to adjust for an entire position group,
Mhm.
or maybe
Yeah.
we did something. Somebody said something that coach didn't like, and now we're off to the races because
Yeah.
somebody wasn't handling their business. So now maybe on the back end we need to adjust for the entire team. So it,
Yeah.
it really all depends, and it's really a case by case thing.
Yeah.
But we try to look at it individually first,
Right.
and then work out from there.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Now, all of this stuff, all these analytics and all this stuff, it's relatively new in college. You know, Catapult's been around for maybe 9 years.
Hmm.
If I stretched it, maybe 10. But it's been mainstream now for 5, 6 years, and it's starting to become more and more commonplace in high schools. Where do you go uh, for a source of information? Okay, and who's helped you? Who are some people, or what are some sources for people to look more into this type of stuff?
Sure.
Because I know
Well,
you got some good ones because you send them to me, and I see them. So where are you getting a lot of your information on all of this stuff?
yes, sir. Well, with force plate, I'd say the number one force, like there's a person on social media. He calls himself force plate coach. I'm not 100% sure what his name is. He might be Matt Jordan. Matt Jordan and force
Yeah,
plate coach might be the same person, but force plate coach is one. He puts out good content not only on YouTube but on his website, on Twitter, on Instagram, those kinds of things. Matt Jordan is phenomenal. Matt Jordan he's a PhD. He's really big into the force plate. Really big on putting out articles with how to analyze data, what metrics you should use, what they mean, how they can be used in fatigue versus long-term athletic development. Matt Cronin, he's the same way. Catapult for GPS. Oh, yeah, Catapult for GPS. They have everything you need is on their website, but then also with managing player load, Tim Gabbett is awesome. I follow him on LinkedIn. We might be connected on LinkedIn. He does a phenomenal job with the load management and diving into GPS. There's a guy at Duke. He's basically the director of performance. His name is Nick Potter. He works with the basketball team. He was a really, really, really big help with Catapult. Tyler Miles he was at Duke. He's at Nebraska now. He ran the Catapult there. He's got to be one of the best in the country at it, and he was really awesome. I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing here at Duke without him taking the time and being willing to show me, because a lot of people are like, oh, this is my baby, I'm going to do it
yeah,
all myself, but he was more than willing to teach me, to let me help him, and in turn that helped me.
yeah.
um who else? Dan Cleather has a book out there called Force. He just released Force 2, which is the biomechanics of sprinting. Force 1 is the biomechanics of training. That is a phenomenal book if you need to know what's going on with the force plate and what some of those metrics mean and how to look at them and analyze a force time curve. That book will help you out with that a lot. I'm giving 3 presentations coming up here soon. One at the New Jersey NSCA clinic, one at the North Carolina NSCA clinic on Saturday, and then one at the CSCCA about force plates. And I referenced that book, and I put a picture of the book in my slides because that's how great that book is. And it's really sciencey at first, but then he starts to break things down really simply for you, so that way what things mean, like impulse, total force over time. Just easy enough. And then if I didn't say, Catapult's website has
Yeah.
a lot to read on there about what their metrics are, what their metrics mean. They do a good job of that. And then, I mean, I'm a Vault guy. I use Vault, but Hawkins' website has a lot of good
Yeah,
stuff on
their
there.
website does have a lot of stuff on it.
Yeah, and then even Vault has some great continuing education on their website as well. So, and then just the way that I've set my algorithms up on Twitter and LinkedIn, Iman Flanagan, he does a great job. You sent me a thread one time of Iman Flanagan that I had to make sure that I saved, that I go back and look at all the time, where
Yeah.
he's talking about, if we need to just use the counter movement jump, but also if you're looking for specific things, like specific like concentric force, right? Move away from the counter movement jump, because you've got the stretch shortening cycle in there, and just use the squat jump. Use the single leg jump if you're really truly looking at asymmetries. And I thought that thread was phenomenal. So he's been somebody that I've started to follow after that, and he's really intelligent as well. Those are some of the big ones. And then just my overall algorithm on Twitter. If somebody's got PhD next to their name, or biomechanist, I'm probably going to follow them and just see what comes up. And I mean, just like most people that know me know, if I can't do anything else, I can find a good research paper. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of information out there.
Absolutely.
A lot of information. All right, so let's say I'm at a school that has no money budgeted for this type of stuff, okay? What is some advice that you could share with our listeners that they can use when planning and organizing their programming, lift and running and practice, that will allow them to prepare their teams for competition and then ensure that they're ready for competition?
Absolutely.
Because our target market is really high schools. I mean, that's we want to educate not necessarily just high schools, but our goal is to educate everyone. But a lot of high school coaches listen to this, and so what are some tips that people that don't have access to all this stuff can use?
Sure. My number one piece of advice would be brilliant at the basics. Be brilliant at the fundamentals. Be fantastic at the fundamentals. Be brilliant at the basics, because being brilliant at the basics is what wins teams championships. In the weight room, on the field, at practice, if you're not brilliant at the basics, if you don't have a good foundation, your house is going to crumble at some point. You need the foundation. Be brilliant at the basics. I don't think you can drill the basics enough. You can't drill the fundamentals, right? And in the weight room, barbells and dumbbells, right? Barbell has withstood the test of time. It's been around just about as long as training has been around. You can get really strong, you can get really powerful, you can get really explosive, you can get really mobile with a barbell and with some dumbbells. You can hit your squats, your pushes, your pulls, your hinges, your rotations, your lunges with barbells and dumbbells. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be flashy. In fact, you would almost wish that most coaches out there, regardless of level, regardless of resources, make sure that their guys can move with a barbell first before going off to any of the other stuff, and I would imagine that any coach, strength coach worth their salt would want their guys to master the basics and be great movers and understand the concepts behind some of the movements with the barbell before you even move to anything else. So, get creative. Once you're brilliant at the basics, get creative, and, don't come out with 5 sets of 10 every day. Use your education, use your resources out there, and make sure that you're prescribing sets and reps a little differently for the guys, so that way it doesn't always get stale. Because if you come in there, you do 5 sets of 10 every day, one, their bodies are going to adapt because they're young, so eventually they'll plateau, and two, they're just not going to be interested anymore. And the engagement part with the athletes, especially at like the high school level, is something that is extremely, extremely important. Trying to get that buy-in, trying to get guys excited, trying to get them to want to come to the weight room, right? And then on the field, I mean, really, if you've got a field with some lines on it, you can get busy, with your landmarks, with running and changing direction and, tempo runs or sprint and acceleration work, whatever you need. You can keep it simple. You can keep it basic as long as you're prepping them to run fast, to be able to recover in between anaerobic bouts, and then also being able to change direction quickly, also having some repeat sprint ability. There's probably some more stuff that I'm missing, but I think that covers it. Then you're probably going to be pretty good, and chances are that if you are a high school strength coach, you're probably a coach. Like if you're working with that football team, you probably coach a position or something like that too. You can work up to some specific stuff with these guys to where they're working, real football, and that will also help prepare them for the game or for practice.
Yeah, good job. Yeah, because, a lot of times some of our podcasts have ended up being a lot about sports science. And I don't want anyone to think that you can't properly train a team without it, without all the bells and whistles. It helps, especially, like, if you're coaching an SEC team, the stakes are high, man.
Right.
So, and their stakes are high no matter what level you're participating at. And I wanted to hear you say that. I wanted to hear you say that just, to reiterate my thoughts and what a high school can do without this technology. So, and that leads me to this next question. I know that you have a lot of experience at the collegiate level working with a lot of different men's and women's sports. I think I added them up once. I think it was like 12 different teams that you have coached, and it's probably more than that because of your time at Howard. I don't know how many staff members you had when you were the head coach there, but I'm sure you've been busy in your career. How would you train the men and women differently, or would you, and why? Like, how much difference is there between training men and women?
The only difference is the demand for the sport. That's all I would say. The biggest difference is I'm not going to train women's soccer like I train men's basketball or football because the demands of the sport are different, right? But you're still going to come in, you're still going to work hard. I'm still going to coach you hard. I'm still going to try and get you to move well. You're still gonna, if I believe in squatting, benching, cleaning, like, maybe somebody out there doesn't want their women's volleyball team to bench or their softball players to bench. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I said, for the demands of the sport, it'll be different. But from the way in which I'm going to coach you, from the work that you're going to do when you come into the weight room, from the expectations, from the standard that's being set, that's all going to be the same because, you can't take it easy on somebody else versus your football team, because that head coach still has championship aspirations, and in order to meet those championship aspirations, everybody's got to be pulling in the same direction, and that's going to take some hard coaching, and it is what it is, and we have to get better, and we have to make sure that you can handle the demands of whatever sport it is that you're going to play and do it at a high level and be able to go into overtime if need be. So whether you're a male or a female, for lack of better terms, you're going to come in here, you're going to get this work.
Yeah. Good deal. And I always, not always, but I've asked that question a lot, and everyone has said the same thing. Coach, there isn't any difference between a male and a female when it comes to developing strength, speed, and power, which I agree with. So, what about the program there at Arkansas? What is y'all's philosophy, and what's a typical week look like for the Arkansas Razorback football team? Let's say all
Absolutely.
season.
Absolutely. Coach Sowders always says he wants to be explosive, violent, and in shape. He wants to be the most explosive, violent, in shape team in the country, and we do our best to train like that.
Yeah.
Um, 4 days a week. We usually go. It's 4 total body days. Usually with either an upper emphasis or a lower emphasis. We're going to train to be explosive. We squat. We do our Olympic movements. We do our power cleans. We do our hand cleans. We snatch here.
Oh wow, awesome.
Yes, sir. We try to move lots of weight. We try to move it really fast. Coach Sowders likes to, he likes to switch it up. You don't really come in super often. It's the same. It's not the same thing
Right.
every day. He does a good job undulating his rep and set schemes. We like to train the cylinder. We like to train the neck. We like to train the core a lot. And from the field, we sprint, we get tempo work in, we do conditioning. Uh, there's some fourth quarter in there, which I know you're very familiar with. And I mean, that's basically it, right? There's nothing that we're doing that nobody else is doing, right?
Yeah.
It's a matter of, like we said before, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And I believe the way in which he does it is very effective, and you can see that when these guys' bodies change. And it's really all about getting buy-in. If you can get the buy-in from the players, no matter where you're at, then you'll see results.
Yeah. All right. So we're getting toward the end of it here, and I was going to ask you about some books and you touched on some stuff a few minutes ago, but what are some books that you're currently reading, or a book that you're currently reading or have read that is in addition to some of the other things that you talked about, and uh, anything else that the listeners can go to find some knowledge bombs?
Sure. I just purchased. It is called Strength Deficit by Tim Karen.
Tim Karen, yeah.
Yeah, and apparently I haven't started it yet, but apparently it'll change the way you think about eccentric and
Yeah.
concentric loading, and the different ways to develop eccentric force and concentric force, which, I mean, being, enjoying the force plate so much,
Yeah.
the better the better eccentric phase that you have, or the harder and faster you're able to snap down and create that force or load, the better you're going to set yourself up for a concentric portion of any movement.
Right.
So I can't wait to dive into that book and see what that's about. I bought Force 2, or the Biomechanics of Sprinting, by
Yeah.
Dan Cleather, and that's been a good read. It's a short read. It's kind of dense at first because he has to get all the physics out of the way. So if you're not
Yeah.
a physicist, which I am not, it gets a little dense there. But again, he does a great job of breaking down really, really complex terms and making them really simple. So I'd say those are the two biggest reads that I have right now that
Yeah.
I can't wait to dive into.
Yeah. So you said something, and now we're going to backtrack a second because, and Tim had a great Instagram post today where he was talking about something efficiency, and it was he read or he quoted something from Bud Sharniga from Dynamic Fitness about the Chinese weightlifters and how efficient they were, and that instead of trying to continue to pull the bar harder, and I'm talking in snatch and clean,
Mm-hmm.
instead of having to pull the bar harder and working so that they can apply more force to move the bar faster and pull it higher, etc., they're getting under the bar more efficiently. Okay,
Right.
so and there was Angel Spazoff alluded to this back in the 80s, that if a weightlifter tries to continue to pull on the bar harder and harder and harder, he can end up hurting himself versus getting underneath the bar quicker. So that's the second time I've heard someone say that. So you're talking about the book and its emphasis on eccentrics, okay? And you talked about if someone can snap down quicker and slam the brakes on and then change direction in the amortization phase, you're going to have a higher or more dynamic concentric movement. All right. So we were talking one time about fatigue, and you broke down the jump. So when you looked at a jump, you first looked at the RSI, you said that earlier, and then you went through a series of different metrics that you looked at from the eccentric phase throughout the concentric phase and then all the way to peak landing forces. Do you remember that conversation that we had? It was a long time ago.
Yeah, I mean, I can.
Yeah, can you go through that and explain why you said if you're stronger and more dynamic in the eccentric phase that you're going to have a greater concentric result? And can you break that down for me or for our listeners? Because I thought that was pretty good. You're very humble. But I want to hear that because again, it just reaffirms my beliefs in this. So excuse us for digressing here and going back, but I would like for you to explain that comment that you made when talking about Tim Caron's book, Strength Deficit.
Absolutely. So, like I said before, the better your eccentric phase is, you're going to set yourself up for a better concentric phase, right? That eccentric phase is when you're creating force, right? So the more force that you can create, right? And in order to create that force, you're going to have to move or load or snap down faster. The faster that I can do that and the more force that I can create, the more force I then have to push off of the platform or the ground or what have you with to then jump higher, if that makes sense, right? So when looking at that, there's a bunch of different ones that I look at that you can look at, right? Eccentric peak power is one, right? Because the more power that you create, the more power that you can create concentrically, right? Just being simple there. Eccentric peak velocity, great fatigue metric right there. You actually sent me the article that talked about time sensitive metrics being great measures for neuromuscular fatigue. So eccentric peak velocity, very time sensitive. So the slower you get to your peak velocity, probably the more fatigued you are if that number is decreasing. Then you've got your eccentric deceleration and eccentric braking metrics, right? Which I didn't know the difference between those two. And I finally got somebody who could explain it to me. Shout out to Dr. Daniel Cohen. Eccentric deceleration, rate of force development or impulse, is the point of minimum velocity to your force at zero velocity. So once you start that movement, the unweighting phase, right, to your point at zero velocity, whereas the braking phase is literally when you're slamming on the brakes. Once you get from maximum velocity or your peak velocity, your eccentric peak velocity, to force at zero velocity. And so because you have that you're starting with that maximum number as opposed to starting with zero, your braking numbers are going to be higher than your eccentric deceleration metrics, right? So breaking it down from your eccentric, right, then you've got to go into your amortization phase after that, which is your force at zero velocity, right? The force at zero velocity is your amortization phase, and is the exact point between your eccentric and your concentric metrics right there. So
That fires me up. Keep going.
Yes, sir. So if your force there is good, if you haven't lost a whole bunch of force from once you slammed on the brakes, you're setting yourself up for a better concentric phase, right? So then once you get to your concentric phase, there's a whole bunch you can look at there. You can look at your rate of force development, and you can look at your rate of force development at 100 milliseconds, at 50 milliseconds, at 250 milliseconds. And the reason that you would look at those is because the earlier in, this is actually helping me for my presentation as well, because explaining it now, I'll be able to explain it later. So thank you. You'll be able to put more force into the ground with your knees flexed than you would with them extended. So once I drop down and I've got all that force that I've created, right, now that I need to use it, I'm going to use most of it at the bottom of that jump where my knees are probably flexed the most, and I can push into the ground the hardest, right? So that's why you want to look at those 50s and 100s and 200s, because the more you get into the movement, the less force you're going to have anyways, because like the straighter, like it's different, but imagine trying to push a heavy sled or any sled with straight legs. You have to bend your legs to push the sled, just like you have to bend your legs to push yourself off of the ground into the air with the force plate. I don't know if that analogy works or not, but it makes sense to me. So looking at your rate of force development there, looking at your peak power, looking at your concentric rate of power development. I know you like that one. And the more I read about concentric rate of power development, that's like an acceleration metric. So working back and forth between catapult and force plate, your concentric rate of power development, if that is high, you'll probably have a higher peak acceleration or max acceleration on your catapult too. Those metrics directly correlate, right? Also with your braking, the guys that decel and have a faster max deceleration, working backwards a little bit, will probably have higher max deceleration capabilities on the field as well, or you'll be able to see that in the catapult as well. So moving back to the concentric, right? You've got your concentric rate of power development, you've got your peak power, you've got concentric mean force, and those are my biggest ones for that. Then you've got your takeoff peak velocity. How fast is your body, or your center of mass is technically what it is. How fast is your center of mass traveling as you're taking off or as you're leaving the force plate? Your peak takeoff force, which is the same, which is, how much force do you have at the takeoff, which you could compare your force there versus your force at your 50 or 100 milliseconds. And you'll see that those numbers are vastly different. There's a big difference in those numbers because of what we just talked about with the knee flexion versus the knee extension. And then, you're in the air and there's nothing going on the force plate when you're in the air. And then you land, and then how hard are you landing? The peak landing force, obviously the higher you jump, the harder you're going to land, just because that's the way that gravity works. But you'd like to see everybody land in a nice athletic position with bent knees. But a lot of guys, especially if you're fatigued, you'll start to see them land harder because they don't bend their knees because they're tired. So that's a good indicator of fatigue as well.
Peak landing force.
Yes, sir.
And then you could see some things with asymmetries as well, like if a guy's got a sore ankle or something, that might show up. Peak landing force.
You got peak landing force asymmetry, which chances are, if somebody's hurt and then you have them jump in the air, most time there might be some outliers out there, but most times you're not going to land on the hurt leg. So if there's a big asymmetry when you land, there's probably something wrong with the leg that you're not landing on, which allows you to ask the questions, what's going on. And then, you can also take some of those asymmetries back to melding this with catapult, right? Catapult has something, called an IMA clock or a spider chart that shows you which direction they've been pushing off and going to the most. So you can correlate that with the asymmetries. Like we did that at Duke one time, and we uncovered that a kid had tendonitis in one of his legs, in one of his knees, So we were able to kind of take him to the athletic trainers and see if we could get help and, intervene with that as well. So just Yeah, you're right. Peak landing force is great for an asymmetry because people aren't going to land hard on the hurt leg if they can avoid it.
Yeah, I always like hearing that breakdown. So thanks for giving that to me one more time.
Yes, sir.
Well, man, I appreciate our time. Okay. You did a great job. Thanks for joining us. And I really, really appreciate this. Like some of my other guests, this was our second go at this. The first time I tried the recording, I screwed it all up, but hopefully I'm getting better on this soundboard over here. So I really, really appreciate you doing this twice for me. Okay. Please do me a favor and tell Kim that everyone here in Baton Rouge and the Moffitts all say hi. You can follow Coach Hill on Twitter at Coach Rod Hill and on Instagram at Big Rod Hill. So again, that's Twitter, Coach Rod Hill, Instagram at Big Rod Hill.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Coach.
Yep. This brings us to the end of today's podcast. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please, if you haven't already done so, follow the podcast and share it with your friends. If you have any questions about the Moffitt method, our training solutions for schools and teams at all levels, go to our website, themoffittmethod.fit, and check it out. You can connect with us through our website, or you can email us at info@themoffittmethod.fit. Again, info@themoffittmethod.fit. Have a great day. Be strong, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.